illegal immigrants only constitute a tiny proportion of the total number of immigrants coming to this country every year. Perhaps we're all immigrants, trading one home for another. First, we leave the womb for air, then the suburbs for the filthy city. In search of a better life, some of us just happen to leave entire countries. These poetic lines are from Rupi Kaur's The Sun and Her Flowers, and they distinctively remind me of my journey into this country. I'm an immigrant from Egypt, and I moved here in search of a better life. My journey here has been nothing but wonderful, and the generosity that I have received is only matched by the incredible opportunities that came my way. Making this speech tonight and not having to worry about the repercussions of making a view that is not favorable to the government of the day is one of them. And if the experience of all immigrants was similar to mine, I would have been sitting on the other side of the house. But myself and others in my position are only part of the story. We're the good ones, the legal ones. But if you read the tabloids or follow Mr. Tice online, you would never hear the word immigrant being used charitably. You would be mostly hearing about the evil ones, the illegal ones that came here through irregular means to steal the jobs of hard-working British people and make your streets unsafe and suck this country dry. In my speech tonight, I would focus on this second category of immigrants. And the reason for that is that the motion before the House is termed in the present participle, suggesting that our failure of immigrants is present and continuing. We're asking if the UK is failing immigrants. And so the focus is primarily on the current policies and attitudes towards them. And the vast majority of the current discourse is directed at those who have arrived here illegally. In order to fail someone, you must owe them something in the first place. So what does the UK owe immigrants? Our duty to some of the most vulnerable people in the world does not only arise from our common humanity and compassion. It also comes as a result of the involvement of the UK in their plight in the first place. We think of immigration as a domestic issue, probably because it is handled by the Home Office. But the figures show otherwise. Two of the biggest sources of illegal immigrants in the past 2 decades were, number one, Iraq, which the UK invaded illegally under false pretenses of weapons of mass destruction, and Afghanistan, where the UK withdrew in a foreign policy disaster, leaving many Afghanis who supported the British Army there to face a grim future. Let us take a step back. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of an Afghani interpreter who worked for the British for many years during the war and was promised their full support and protection. His story is a story that does not start on the shores of England. It is a story that starts in the mountains of Afghanistan. Does the UK not owe a duty to him who put his life on the line? But before I answer that question, it falls upon me to introduce the speakers of the opposition. Speaking first is Sarah, the union's lovely graduate officer and one of our hardest working members of committee. Now, I'm very surprised that Sarah is sat so comfortably on that side of the House. An experienced debater, I'd encourage you not to be duped by her words. Not least given that her text to me earlier this week reads, and I quote, "I don't know why I'm on the opposition with the far-right nutters." And she continued, "UK immigration is so damn unethical." Sarah, I could not agree more. Speaking second, we have Prajwal Pandey, a first-year PPE student from New College. Given Prajwal's experience as a telephone campaigner for Rishi Sunak's first unsuccessful campaign for the Tory leadership, I'm sure that Prajwal is in his comfort zone advocating for a losing side. And finally, We have Mr. Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform Party UK. Now, the last time Mr. Tice was at the Oxford Union, it took him quite a while to get his words out when he was asked if he would have a problem with Romanians living next door to him. I hope he's not too bothered by having a British Indian or a Canadian Pakistani sat next to him tonight. Madam President, these are your speakers, and they're most welcome. The Prime Minister was making a speech a few weeks ago and standing behind a lectern that has "Stop the Boats" written all over it. I found it very interesting that he used the word fairness at least 4 times during that speech. And he was arguing that illegal immigrants are gaming the system and skipping the queue. Now, let me tell you what is unfair. It is unfair that £290 million from hard-working British taxpayers has been paid to Rwanda amidst an unprecedented cost of living crisis. It is unfair that the Rwanda plan has had nothing to show for it, with botched flights making the government into a laughingstock. And it is truly unfair that courts have been plagued with cases on a clearly doomed proposition. Ladies and gentlemen, it is crystal clear that not only immigrants have been failed, the British public has also been failed. But it doesn't have to be this way. Now, I realize that the motion before the House refers to the UK as a whole. And on this side of the House, we're not at all seeking to disregard the historic efforts made by the British people to welcome immigrants and immigration. But the buck stops with the government. And this is not even a Tory-Labour divide. No, thank you. Both of the parties that will in all likelihood be governing the UK and making the decisions that will affect the lives of many thousands of refugees and asylum seekers are playing to the rhetoric that demonizes immigrants. Words matter. And if there is one reason you should vote for the proposition tonight, it would be the disparaging rhetoric that blindly misrepresents the facts around this issue. For one, illegal immigrants only constitute a tiny proportion of the total number of immigrants coming to this country every year. Yet we always hear that the UK is being swamped and flooded and invaded even by immigrants. When the British public were polled, they said that on the whole, they want less immigration. Fair enough. But when polled by category, so if asked, do you want more foreigners in the NHS? Do you want more foreigners in the care sector? They always say yes. What is more revealing is which places in the UK are most apathetic to immigrants. UKIP famously won a by-election in Clacton, a town where less than 1 in 20 people have been born abroad. Contrast that with London, where despite the fact that it is the place that has the most immigrants, it is also the place that is most favorable to immigration. And what this tells us is that for many people, the fear of immigration is not racism. It is just that they were made to fear the invisible, the unknown. It is a constructed boogeyman that is drummed by Mr. Tice and his colleagues. And so to sum up, ladies and gentlemen, I hope to have convinced you that firstly, we do owe a responsibility to immigrants, and specifically refugees and asylum seekers. And secondly, that both the policies and the rhetoric that have been adopted to deal with refugees have been shameful. But if you do not vote against the House tonight, if you do not vote for the House tonight, think of what you would be voting for. You would be voting that the UK government is not failing immigrants. You would be voting that when the government drove vans around with the words "go home" written on them, they did not fail immigrants. You'd be voting that when the government wrongly detained and in some cases illegally deported members of the Windrush generation, they did not fail immigrants. Let me end as I started, with a poem from an infinitely more articulate individual than myself, the British Somali poet Wasan Shire. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. No one leaves home unless home. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You tear up your passport in an airport toilet, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear to you that you would not be going back. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one burns their palms under trains, beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck, feeding on newspapers, unless the miles traveled means something more than the journey. No one crawls under fences. No one wants to be beaten and pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches where your body is left aching, unless home chases you to the border and tells you to quicken your legs, leave your clothes behind, crawl through the desert, and wade through the oceans, drown, beg, and forget your pride. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. You only leave home when home is a voice in your ear telling you, leave. Run away from me. I don't know what I have become, but I know that anywhere is safer than here. Ladies and gentlemen, we're failing immigrants in the UK today, but we don't have to be. To break away from the language of vilification, to do away with the scapegoating, for us to be that safe home that Toussaint Chiré talks about. This motion should stand. This motion must stand. Vote with the proposition. Thank you.